Pamela stormed into Uptown with visible frustration on her face, her coat unfastened and her hair messily pinned up, strands falling lightly across her forehead. Danny had been seated for a while already, her sharp gaze missing none of Pamela's movements. Pamela apologized for being late, hastily explaining that she had to deal with an urgent matter involving Ashley. Half joking, half serious, she confessed that lately she'd started suspecting Ashley was looking a little too often in Derek's direction. A man she described as youthful but shallow, the exact type Ashley tended to gravitate toward, especially when she was trying to fill the void in her heart with something temporary. But the moment Danny heard Derek's name, Danny argued that Ashley's simple-mindedness could never withstand the intense, arrogant sensuality that Andre exuded, and if anything were to happen between them, it would be a disaster, with Ashley inevitably being the one who lost. Danny didn't hesitate to admit that she had once conquered Andre herself. Although she never intended to claim him forever, she wasn't willing to share anything she had once considered hers. She could forgive fleeting flings, but she would never allow anyone to trample over her footsteps without paying a price. When Pamela mentioned old wounds and battles Danny had fought against vermin, Danny's thoughts immediately went to Bill. Bitterly, she acknowledged that he had chosen someone else, a snake who could play the kitten. Though she claimed to have moved on from Bill, a flicker of heaviness passed through her eyes as she spoke his name. She carelessly referred to the woman as that gold digger whose name I can't remember. That was when Hayley made her entrance, cutting in with a shrill, provocative tone and introducing herself as if on a brightly lit stage. Her fake confidence was instantly mocked by both Danny and Pamela. Never one to back down, Danny hurled dagger-like insults, stating flatly that Hayley had nothing going for her besides legs like tree trunks, and that if she had made it this far, it was because she'd spread wide, not because of talent or intellect. Unfazed, Hayley responded proudly that her passion had awakened Bill's youthful desires, and that from the first moment they locked eyes, he had belonged to her. She boasted that the baby in her womb would be the unbreakable bond that would make them a family. That statement poured gasoline on Danny's fury. The insult was written all over her face. Hayley didn't stop there, calling Danny a dried-up witch who couldn't hold down a decent job, let alone a man's heart. But Danny, unfazed, delivered a brutal blow. That Hayley's baby was a joke, and if there was any justice in the world, she'd earn a place of honor in hell. At that moment, Hayley began gasping, clutching her stomach, and ran into the bathroom as if in excruciating pain. Pamela stood up in alarm, ready to follow, but Danny stopped her, insisting it was all a show meant to draw pity. Pamela remained uncertain, but her eyes flickered with guilt. She quietly exited Uptown, but no one noticed that she merely circled the parking lot, as if waiting for something. Danny was just about to check a message from Andre when a piercing scream erupted from the bathroom. Hayley emerged staggering, soaked in blood, trembling as she cried out that something terrible had happened to her baby. The chaotic scene, the blood staining her dress, her shaking hands gripping the door frame, sent the entire cafe into a panic. But what froze Danny wasn't the blood, it was the timing. Why had Hayley waited until Pamela had just left to reappear in this dramatic state? Had she planned it to avoid being caught faking it? Or had someone witnessed something in the restroom but hadn't spoken up? Danny stood still, her mind racing with suspicion. She noticed the cut on Hayley's arm, but the blood wasn't flowing like from a fresh wound, it looked partially dried. The situation grew more complex as Pamela re-entered Uptown, her face pale. Seeing Hayley being helped into a chair, she whispered to Danny that she couldn't forgive herself if anything happened to the baby, but there was a glint of icy calculation in her eyes, like she knew something but wasn't ready to say it. Danny's phone buzzed. A message from Andre. Meet now. About Hayley.
Urgent.
Before she could react, she noticed Hayley watching her. Not with the pain of a grieving mother, but with the satisfaction of someone who had just executed a flawless trap. And beneath the golden lights of Uptown, the deception began seeping into every corner, infecting every heart still capable of doubt, signaling the storm to come. one that would show the powerful that in this game, the survivor would be the one who held the truth. The question lingered. Had Pamela truly left? Or had she seen part of the performance and now didn't know what to do with that knowledge? And if Hayley wasn't truly pregnant, who would be the first to expose the elaborate lie before Uptown drowned under the weight of a perfectly crafted deception? Naomi entered Ashley's apartment in a state of confusion but with firm resolve. Lately, family dinners had been dominated by one unwanted topic: Bill and his new family. The constant mention of Hayley's name choked her, not from jealousy, but from an unsettling sense that something wasn't right. She looked at Ashley, once her childhood anchor, now seeming lost in distant thoughts, as if harboring an untouched secret. Naomi confided that she didn't understand how a woman like Hayley could so easily enter a family, claim pregnancy, and take everything as if it were her due. While venting, Naomi mentioned a recent incident. Hayley had tripped over a toy box in the living room with surprising agility for someone supposedly 6 months pregnant. But what stuck with Naomi wasn't the stumble. It was Hayley's unusual reaction to the mention of an ultrasound. At a previous party, Naomi had offered to accompany Hayley to a hospital visit, but Hayley had quickly deflected with a vague refusal. Naomi had let it slide, until now, when she repeated it to Ashley, and Ashley gave her a strange, frozen look, a mix of guilt and alarm, as if Naomi had touched a truth Ashley had been hiding. Sensing the shift, Naomi fell silent, observing Ashley for a few seconds before quietly leaving, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. That night, she reopened an old medical notebook containing addresses of clinics Bill had once visited with her mother. On a yellowed page, she found the name of a gynecologist who had worked at the clinic where Hayley claimed to have had her first ultrasound. The next morning, Naomi visited the clinic pretending to be a new patient and casually mentioned Hayley's name. The receptionist frowned and whispered that no Hayley had been registered in the last 3 months. Naomi thanked her and left, her heart pounding. On the way home, she stopped at a pharmacy and bought a blood test kit. She knew she couldn't accuse someone based on instinct alone. But if Hayley was lying about her pregnancy, biological checks would be her undoing. 3 days later, the DNA test on a hair sample Naomi discreetly collected from Hayley revealed something startling. No trace of HCG, the hormone only present in pregnant women. Naomi didn't jump to conclusions. She knew Hayley could have miscarried or never been pregnant. She needed more proof. She returned to Ashley and confronted her directly. Ashley evaded at first, but Naomi's piercing gaze and sharp analysis eventually wore her down. Ashley confessed that weeks ago, she'd entered Hayley's dressing room and discovered a flesh-toned silicone belly hidden in a fabric drawer. She had kept quiet, unsure if her eyes had deceived her. Now Naomi understood everything. Hayley had never been pregnant. She had fabricated the entire story to ensnare Bill and infiltrate the Dupree family fortune. But why? For love? Or for money? Naomi wasn't certain, but she knew she had to expose it before Bill was completely manipulated. She arranged a meeting with Andre at a downtown cafe. He too had his doubts. When Naomi revealed what she had uncovered, Andre remained silent, then showed her an old message Hayley had sent him. Flirtatious lines hinting at a physical connection and promising that he could be father of the next child. Naomi was stunned. Hayley was recycling her scheme with a new man while keeping Bill as a power conduit. Instead of confronting her, Naomi decided to act covertly. With Pamela's help, who had also grown suspicious since the staged bloodbath, they installed a recording device in Uptown's living room. Days later, a conversation between Hayley and a man, likely a private doctor, was captured. They discussed a new shipment of silicone bellies and fake medical paperwork. Naomi now had irrefutable evidence. All she needed was the right moment to bring Hayley down. She couldn't allow this woman to continue controlling her father with a non-existent baby. She couldn't let a fraud walk into the heart of the Dupree legacy. And above all, she couldn't let the truth be buried beneath a perfectly painted smile. Naomi had entered a war, but this time, not for pride. This time she was fighting for truth, and truth always holds value, even if buried under layers of makeup and counterfeit silicone. After days of quiet evidence gathering, Naomi had everything she needed. The hormone test proving Hayley had never been pregnant, the recorded conversation with the suspected fake doctor, and Ashley's chilling confession about discovering the silicone belly. That was when Danny decided silence was no longer an option. For the first time after enduring years of humiliation from a woman who had infiltrated her family, she officially filed a lawsuit against Hayley in the county court. The charges: defamation, false claims of miscarriage with intent to manipulate social status, and interference with familial relationships, especially with her daughters. Danny's legal team also petitioned for a judicial inquiry into the legal validity of Hayley's previous pregnancy claims. The case instantly shook Uptown and set local media ablaze. Those who once hailed Hayley as a symbol of empowered femininity began to question her integrity, while Danny's loyalists hailed the lawsuit as long overdue justice. All eyes now turned to Bill, caught in the middle with nowhere to hide. As a husband, a father, and a community figurehead, his decision could reshape the entire course of the scandal. Naomi understood this, and instead of blindly siding with her mother, she chose to lay the truth bare before her father. She walked into his estate, handed him the dossier of evidence, and challenged him to choose either the wife who had raised his daughters and stood by him for decades, or the woman who faked a pregnancy, invented a miscarriage, and lied to tether him to a future she had built on deceit. Bill finished reading the file, placed it gently on the table, but his gaze didn't meet Naomi's. It drifted off into the distance, lost in a flood of old memories. Without a word, he picked up his phone and called his private attorney. In the days that followed, Bill appeared before the public with eerie composure. He neither defended Danny nor denounced Hayley. He simply maintained silence. Then came the first day in court. Danny arrived wearing an understated yet commanding outfit, flanked by Pamela and Naomi. On the other side, Hayley entered like a movie star, surrounded by lawyers, still smiling softly with a provocative air. Bill sat in the center, expressionless, unreadable. As the evidence was presented, the negative hormone test, the recording with the doctor, Ashley's sworn testimony, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to Hayley, whose smirk had vanished. But just before the judge could conclude the preliminary hearing, Hayley's attorney filed a counter-motion that Naomi's collection of the hair sample constituted a violation of privacy, and thus the evidence should be deemed inadmissible. Suddenly, Naomi was no longer just a witness. She was now legally threatened for how she had obtained the proof. In a stunning twist, the court ruled that Naomi would be placed under administrative detention until a hearing could determine the legality of her methods. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Pamela and Danny were stunned. But Bill, for the first time since the scandal broke, turned away, saying nothing. He didn't rise to object. He didn't plead for leniency. He didn't protect his daughter. He sat motionless as Naomi was escorted out by police officers, even as she cried that she had done it all for the truth, for the family. Danny screamed at him to act, to do something, anything, but Bill's eyes were now just hollow voids. That night, the news exploded across social media. Images of Naomi in custody became the epicenter of controversy, while public opinion about Bill was deeply split. Some branded him a traitor to his ex-wife and daughter, while others argued he was simply obeying the law. Inside the family, however, something had cracked. Danny was devastated. She couldn't comprehend how the man who once vowed to protect his family could watch his own daughter be taken away. Pamela harbored growing suspicions. She didn't believe Bill was merely passive. She began to wonder if he was hiding something, not out of love for Hayley, but out of fear. Maybe Hayley had something on him. Maybe Bill had been complicit in her deception. Naomi, inside the detention facility, didn't cry. Instead, she wrote. Every night she recorded memories, legal strategies, the timeline of lies, Bill's silence, and Hayley's manipulations. Within her, a storm was forming. Not a storm of vengeance, but of justice betrayed. She swore that when the evidentiary hearing concluded, She would not only destroy Hayley, but also drag down every enabler who chose to turn a blind eye to the truth, even if it meant going after her own father. Then, in a shocking turn, Bill visited Hayley late at night at the temporary apartment she had been moved to pending judgment. He didn't scold her. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "It has to stop." But Hayley laughed. She placed a hand on her belly and reminded Bill that if she went down, she'd take everything with her, including the secret they once buried together. A secret no one else knew. Time, long ago, when Bill had pressured a doctor to forge an ultrasound report to help Hayley escape charges in an unrelated case in Georgia. Danny didn't know. Naomi didn't know. But Hayley did. And she kept that secret like a knife against his throat. Bill stood frozen. He realized then that his so-called change of heart wasn't about love. It was about fear. And in that moment, he lost the last shred of moral authority he had left. He was no longer a husband, a father, or the man Danny once loved. He had become a pawn in the hands of the very woman he had let into their lives through a lie. And though the media might praise his poise during court proceedings, only he knew the truth, that when the truth is buried, even a dynasty can collapse from something as simple as a stumble over a toy box.